Cageside with John Morgan.
And welcome everybody, another episode of Cageside with John Morgan, post UFC 302 edition. I'm your host, Eric McMahon. Man, Islam Makhachev does it again, still reigning supreme lightweight division. Is this the last time we will see Dustin the Diamond Poirier? I hope not. Sean Strickland solidifies himself as the #1 contender in the middleweight, says he is willing to wait. We will break down a ho-hum co-main event, but anytime you get Strickland in the cage, even a ho-hum is going to be fun. To help break down all of that, and we were hoping to get some Conor McGregor press conference clips to talk about here. Didn't happen. Don't know if you guys are up on that, but to help bring it all down, John Morgan. Follow him on Twitter or X, shall I say, John Morgan _MMA. What up, brother?
What's going on, man? Yeah, you laid it out perfectly, man, to set this whole thing up. It's so funny because we knew we were going to be talking UFC 302, right? I mean, the main event absolutely delivered after a card that was okay, not the greatest, not the worst, but the main event really delivered on entertainment value. And then we thought we'd be talking about Conor McGregor. We're 4 weeks away from Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler. We thought we were going to be getting some press conference footage from Dublin, Ireland. What fun that was going to be. We were going to have some clips, the master of the microphone that is Conor McGregor. And then we find out overnight in early hours in Europe that the press conference has been postponed. I would go ahead and use the word canceled, if we're being honest with you. It's not happening, but what weirdness around that. So we had this great main event and then weirdness already as the news cycle moves on. I'm good, man. It's a lot to talk about.
Before we get into Dustin and Islam, Paulo, Sean, I have to give a shout out. So on the prelims, the early prelims, Mickey Gall and Bassil Hafez was an absolutely amazing night. And it is a travesty that there was no fight night awards for these guys.
Hey, they were sitting on that fight of the night bonus until the main card, right? I'm sure there's some money coming their way. I mean, the UFC does still send some undisclosed bonuses in addition to the official bonuses as well. And look, for Mickey Gall, I can tell you, man, he probably was just happy to be back. You know what I mean? Obviously, you know, the money that he can make in the UFC versus money that he would make anywhere else is certainly different. So I know he was proud to be back with the organization on the fight card. But yeah, those two dudes absolutely delivered, man. I had seen Bassil Hafez come through the CFFC, so I'd gotten an up-close view of his work and how dangerous he can be. And, man, yeah, those two guys were sitting on Fight of the Night bonus until the main event. So hopefully they got a little cash heading their way because that was a great fight. So good shout-out on the early card, man. That was a good one.
I was on the edge of my seat that entire fight. And before we get in, one last thing on that is, man, I always like kind of had like an underlying respect for Mickey Gall, UFC fighter, but, you know, did kind of get in a very precarious way. This dude, he ain't just a good looking dude, man. The dude is tough as nails.
That was one of my big takeaways too, man. Is just I feel like even though he came up short, he proved that he belongs at this level, right? Because I think there was some questions. Does he belong here, right? I mean, he, as you said, he got into the UFC very, very early. We understand why he was brought in. He kind of went out and he had to work his way back. But that's what I walked away from that fight thinking is that, you know what, this dude deserves to be, because he was getting touched up early, right? It would have been really easy to just fold and say, yeah, man, that's it. And he fought back and he battled back. He proved his durability. He proved his toughness. He proved he belongs in the UFC. So even, you know, you could do that sometimes. You're not going to win every time out there, but when you can show your heart, when you can show your determination, he proved exactly that. So I came away with that same impression. This guy deserves the opportunity to compete in the UFC.
All right, let's not waste any time. UFC 302 from the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey. Islam Makhachev submits Dustin Poirier, and the official, I was reading, Bravo choke, but, you know, really it was a Darce. I don't know if that's the same name. I don't know, but, man, we had everything you can look for in a main event title fight. Like, all the storylines were there. Questions were answered on both sides. And at the end of the day, it was just an entertaining fight played out with the victor who, you know, the betting odds said was going to happen. It kind of played out the way, maybe took a little longer than most people thought. But, man, just a great fight, a great entertaining fight. I'm not going to go down and say like this was like the greatest fight of all time, where I've heard a lot of people say it wasn't, right? The storylines made it great, the crowd made it great, and the key players made it great.
100%. The fight delivered way more than I thought it, because look, we talked about it, right? The odds were, hugely in the favor of Islam Makhachev, right? I mean, there was a possibility, and it did almost happen, that this thing could have ended in the first round, right? I mean, he could have absolutely steamrolled Dustin Poirier, but he didn't. And I think you laid it out perfectly. It was a very entertaining fight. It was a great fight, but it was the people involved and the storylines involved that made it even better, right? I mean, we know what Dustin Poirier had been through and the journey that he had gone through to get to this point, and him openly saying, this is my last chance to win an undisputed UFC title. And he's this beloved figure, but here he is facing this, powerful dude in Islam Makhachev, who's just on this incredible run right now, the #1 pound-for-pound fighter. And so it's all these storylines. The one that we didn't even, I didn't realize, to be honest, how about the fact that the arena is actually on Lafayette Street? That's the address that it's on, Lafayette Street, the Prudential Center. And so, that kind of came up. Here's Dustin Poirier from Lafayette, Louisiana, in this arena on Lafayette Street. Is it all, the story? And he almost gets steamrolled in the opening round. You go, yeah, that guy's that good. But then he starts fighting back, right? He's, in between the corners, they're saying, hey, man, make sure, Mike Brown with the great adjustment, saying, make sure that you're not up against the cage. You've got to have this thing out in the center where it makes it tougher for him to get those takedowns. He starts battling back. Round 2, a much closer round. Round 3, I had him winning round 4. He's got he cuts Islam Makhachev open. Is he going to get it? And then, oh, no, just as the momentum is shifting in his way, Islam gets this insane, beautiful takedown with the ankle pick and the sweep and gets the choke. I mean, just everything involved in it so great. And now, now is it his last fight? Is it not? The emotions. I mean, just everything that surrounded it made this fight amazing. It delivered entertainment value. I don't know. I walked away from it. As you say, it's not the greatest fight I've ever seen, but it was a damn good fight. And the principles involved and everything involved around it made this about the things that we love about MMA.
I don't care who you were and who you were rooting for and how the previous round played out. Every time they were standing at range and at distance, you knew the possibility was there for Dustin to get it. And I was sitting on the edge of my seat the whole time being like, is it going to happen? But the major takeaway that I took from all of this, and I don't think this is a hot take, Islam outstruck him.
Yes. That's 100% true. It's 100% true. Islam's boxing and his striking is getting way better, right? We think about the wrestling base that he comes from, obviously the Dagestanis and wrestling from the time they're little kids, but his striking is getting better. And the other thing that I really took away from it as I was watching it is, on paper, if it's a boxing match, Dustin Poirier, I would say probably wins a boxing match, but it feels like it's the striking that comes from the confidence of not being worried about somebody shooting on you, right? Islam Makhachev is sitting down on his shots. He's throwing power and everything, right? Because he's not worried. If you dive in on his legs, fine. He'll scramble. He'll make that adjustment. He'll work from there. Whereas Dustin Poirier knows he can't give up that takedown. So that's what I felt like as I was watching is Dustin Poirier is throwing shots, but then as he throws shots, he's immediately concerned that, hold on, man, I got to get my hands back down so I can dig underhooks if this guy shoots in on my legs. And so it just really stops you from being able to fully commit to those striking combinations. So I think it was kind of a twofold thing, right? The Islam is getting better at striking, but he's also got the freedom of not being worried about what's coming back his way in terms of a takedown that really kind of short circuits somebody that might be a striker that knows that they might have to defend a takedown at any moment.
I mean, that's a great point, because my next point, which now kind of throws it in flux based off of what you just said, watching that, I didn't get that same read, but now I feel like an idiot that I didn't. But what really stuck out at me was the power difference. Islam had more power. I mean, the damage that Poirier was wearing from these strikes. Now, the difference in the damage that Islam had was from an elbow, and kind of like, that's very delicate skin right there. You take a glancing blow right there, it's gonna cut it. I've seen it 1,000 times. But Dustin took some heavy damage, and almost all these shots, I mean, and it resonated through the television. They were thudding shots. And when Dustin got hit, it moved him back every single time. And that's what then allowed Islam to then get him to the cage. And it wasn't because he was bullying him to the cage. It was almost that the shots were so damn powerful that Dustin had to reset, and that's when the entry would happen.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we talked about going in, right? Is that's where really Islam does his best work. So that's why it's the concern, right? You don't want to get into the clinch with him. That's a bad spot. He's not necessarily the best, blast double guy at you, but when he gets in that clinch, he's very effective there. And listen, I think the other thing that it's a factor in that is just the fact that Islam is a big dude. I mean, there's talks about him going to welterweight, and he mentions the fact that, hey, he wants a new challenge, and obviously being a champ is historical. There's only a handful of people that have done it. But honestly, I just think that lightweight cut is getting very, very, very hard for him. Whereas Dustin Poirier is a guy that, does cut down to lightweight, but was at one point competing at featherweight. Now, his cut to featherweight was insane. It was bad. I remember talking to his team and like how measured he was about like, well, my dinner today is 6 almonds and 4, leaves of spinach or whatever, stuff like that. I mean, it was bad. So I'm not saying he's a small guy. He's a decent sized lightweight. I just think that Islam is a huge lightweight that is, may have a future at welterweight someday as well. So I think it's twofold. Number one, like I said, I think that power comes from the confidence that Islam can really just sit down on shots because he's not concerned about you shooting a takedown in return. And then the fact that I think he's just the naturally bigger guy. I mean, that dude is absolutely huge. So the power was there, man. The power was certainly there. And I do think you can't ignore Islam striking. If you were doing that before, if you thought of him as only a grappler, man, you can't do that any longer.
Yeah, ask Charles Oliveira if he's only a striker.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Ask a lot of other opponents if he's only a striker. Ask Alexander Volkanov, or grappler. Ask Alexander Volkanovski if he's only a grappler. Because he ain't. I mean, he is so well-rounded. And a lot of people, I think, will look at this and say that it was such a great fight by Dustin. Like, Dustin exceeded expectations. And that may be true, right? I look at it a different way. Is you had the weight of the world against Islam here. Nobody wanted you to win this fight.
True.
Right? And he overcomes adversity in this fight to secure a submission victory in the 5th and final round, not against anybody, against Dustin Poirier, a legend of this game, a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer. I think what it says to me is that Islam is that great. We already knew Dustin was that great. He was now in a dogfight with a first ballot Hall of Famer and somebody who's not past their prime. Like, Dustin, you're not past your prime. I understand what's there to fight for. That's the valid argument. It's not that you're past your prime. You're probably still in your absolute prime.
Absolutely.
And Islam overcame adversity in that fight, persevered, and really, let's be honest, he somewhat dominated this fight. Not the whole time, but in every aspect. He out-grappled him, he out-wrestled him, and he outstruck him.
Yep.
That speaks volumes to me about how good Islam is.
I agree. I agree with everything you said there. I think that, and it's sad to say that nobody wanted him to win, but it's true, right? Everybody was cheering for the story of Dustin Poirier, man. I mean, a legend that had failed at this one thing and openly admitted how much it meant to him and said this might be the end. I'm torn on the fact whether it should be the end, not because he can't compete, because you're absolutely right. The man could. And hold on, if Islam does make the move up to welterweight, now all of a sudden you got a vacant 155-pound title on the line. Are you telling me anybody would complain if Dustin Poirier is one of the 2 athletes in that cage competing for that undisputed title? So there is a possibility. I would say don't file the retirement paperwork just yet. Let's wait to see what happens. But yes, this was a great fight for Islam Makhachev. And man, you saw the emotion of his team and his corner as they piled in when that fight was over, right?
Highly against the rules. I was worried he might get disqualified. Like, honestly,
I know.
That is grounds for disqualification.
Well, and Usman Nurmagomedov wasn't even a licensed cornerman. He got kicked out of the arena. They booted him right out. So I mean, but that emotion of them piling in there goes to show you what they were seeing. They saw that yes, our guy is dominating this fight. But again, Dustin Poirier to me won round 4. you're going into round 5 and he's having, some success early in round 5, and you know that he's dangerous. He could catch it. You see your man Islam is fading a little bit, not tremendously, but he's being pushed. He's being tested. He's got this nasty cut. Blood is everywhere, and he finds a way to get. So I think it's a fight that makes Islam better as well, right? Because I always like to see that at any level of the sport, whether it be the highest level or in the development of it as well. I like to see guys get tested, right? Because I think that benefits them. I mean, sure, everybody would like to be undefeated and dominate every athlete they face and every fight that they have, but you got to get yourself in those deep waters. You got to know what it feels like when you're not being able to finish a guy the way that you're used to. You got to know that you can dig deep, that there's an extra level. So I think this is a fight that makes Islam better long term. And I think it was just, and that's what it's all these things, all these different factors are what made this such a great fight and so much, so heavy on entertainment value. And there's still storylines to go as to where they each go from here. There's still question marks.
So I tend to disagree with you a little bit. I had Islam up 4-0 going into 5.
Okay.
Now a lot of people say he did win 4, and I assume it was because of the damage that Makhachev had in that. And that's where this is that subjective judging that I don't like. In my head, he still outstruck Dustin, closed the distance off him, and a lot of time Dustin pushing him off and saying, "Get the F off me," or "F you," or whatever he was saying.
Yep.
He still got outstruck that round. He still got taken down. He still got his back take. Now he did hit like one of the cleanest switches you will see. And out of that switch, he throws the elbow right out of it. Masterful. But to me, that didn't negate everything. But in the scoring criteria, this is where we go. Damage reigns supreme. So nobody's wrong in that situation. I had him up 4-0.
Yeah, I can see it. I mean, listen, it was interesting the way the judges had it, right? Because Judge Eric Colon gave Dustin Poirier round 2 only. Sal D'Amato gave him round 4 only. And Chris Lee had him 2 and 4 and had it even going to that 5th and final round. So he was down 3-1 on 2 of the cards. Dustin Poirier definitely needed to finish. Ultimately, it didn't matter because Islam was the one that got the submission. But yeah, those rounds were tight. At least goes to show you that it was tight. The fact that you can at least make an argument about it, right, as to whether it went one way or the other. I had this, and I mean, I know that obviously you're duty bound to enforce the criteria, but sometimes I do, the criteria I feel like can be worded a little bit better, a little bit differently. I still think there's some tweaks and some adjustments that need to be made, but at least the fact that you can make a discussion about it at least goes to show you that it was competitive. Although if you had it 4-0, I can't hate on you for that.
Chris Lee had it 2-2.
Chris Lee had it 2-2 going in. He had 2 and 4 for Dustin Poirier.
Okay. Can I get on my soapbox really quick?
Yes, you can.
Listen, Chris Lee is a phenomenal judge. I mean, he's everywhere. Every event, every big event. He's getting every big fight, right? Don't worry, we'll get into some judging in the co-main. But, you know how they refereed Shaq differently and they referee LeBron James differently?
Yes.
I think they judge Islam differently. I saw it in the Volkanovski fight.
Right.
And now hearing you read that, I see it in this one as well. Like, listen, conventional wisdom, damage, this, that, and the other, right? Dustin wore all the damage. I mean, Islam had a cut, in reality. But he got outstruck, he got out-grappled, and he got out-wrestled. That's the bottom line. And he got outstruck, and he got out-grappled, and he got out-wrestled in every single round. Now, just because a takedown didn't come in every round, or that he was able to finally spin out against the cage or something, doesn't mean that you're not losing that grappling exchange. Yeah, and so I think when everybody has this preconceived notion, because contrary to any impartial whatever, everybody has a preconceived notion going in. And when anything defies that, it's like, oh, the other guy won the round.
Yeah, no, it's funny you say that because I've kind of struggled with this over the years, like whether I think it's better or worse for a judge and or referee to know a fighter well, right? Because especially if you're judging, because you think you know what that fighter should be doing if they're winning the fight, right? But maybe they had a little different game plan, or maybe the things played out a little bit differently, and they're still winning even if they're not doing what you expected them to do. And it's funny because I'm looking at the stats on UFCstats.com as you're talking, and even like I look at round 4. So I thought the same thing with you as round 2. I thought, oh, that's a better round for Dustin. That was much closer. He dealt with the takedowns a lot better. but I still think Islam won the round. You know what I mean? Round 4, I thought because of the damage, because of the cut that he did, but as I'm looking at the stats, Dustin did outstrike him just barely, significant strikes 23-20. Islam had 2 minutes and 28 seconds of control time in that round. So almost half the round of control time. And yet I said that, Dustin Poirier won the round. So I think there's a lot to what you're saying there, and that, he gets judged a little bit differently, because it's like if the fight's not playing out the way we expect it to play out, and for him to be completely dominant, we're like, oh, maybe he lost that round.
What were the stats on round 2 then?
Round 2, Islam had 26 strikes to Dustin Poirier's 24, insignificant strikes. Dustin Poirier actually had a slight edge, 32-30 in total strikes. Islam did have the 1 takedown. He was 1 of 4 on takedowns, and he had 49 seconds of control time as well.
Okay, it was close. It was
close.
Okay, well, I mean, yeah, an argument can be made. I still disagree with it. I mean, octagon control, I don't know. I mean, we could get down judging rabbit holes, and I don't really want this ain't the fight to do it. Like,
I was gonna say, if we're gonna go down a rabbit hole, it better not be on this one. I will say this. I want to say, before we move on to anything else, I do want to say, whether or not this is Dustin Poirier's last fight, I hope people understand, and I know you do as part of this fight game, when he talks about what am I fighting for, right? I got to decide what I'm fighting for, because as I laid out, I think he could absolutely get a title shot pretty quickly. Islam Makhachev has talked about moving up to welterweight. We'll see what happens at 304 in Manchester. If Islam does decide to move up to 170 pounds, you've got a vacant title on the line, and Dustin could be right back in a title shot. But when he talks about what am I fighting for, man, this sport, you have to be absolutely selfish to compete at the highest level. And you saw his wife and you saw his daughter in attendance. You saw the emotion from his daughter, how difficult that is. And he talks about how hard it is to be away from them, right? To go to Florida, to set up camp, and to be away from them. And he has attained financial independence. His family is doing good. He doesn't need to make any more money. And so he does it because he still loves competing. And he absolutely has the right to compete at the highest level, because he's competitive with the #1 pound-for-pound guy on the planet. Dustin Poirier is absolutely in his prime. He can still compete. But every time he does so, he's taking away time that he'll never get back from his family. And if it's to put food on the table, that's why you give up your time, right? Because you need to put food on the table for your family. But if the food is already sitting on the table back at home, and the food in the pantry is stocked to the brim as well, and you're still spending time away from them because of something you love, then you're doing it just for you, not for them. And he absolutely deserves every right to go do it just for him if he wants.
He's doing it for us too, John Morgan.
Hey, that's a good point too. We'll be selfish. We'll be selfish. To heck with your family. But I think that's what he has to weigh. So when he talks about why am I doing this, I hope people understand that's what he's weighing in his mind. He's absolutely one of the best in the world. He can still go cash some checks and put a few more million in the bank, but he has to do it at the price of being away from his wife and his daughter, which he doesn't want to do, to put them through the stress of a mixed martial arts fight, which he doesn't necessarily want to do. And that's the balance that he has to strike, and he has to decide on right now.
Aside from being just an amazing fighter and me getting indoctrinated with Dustin Poirier early in his career because of a fight documentary that I saw 15 years ago that probably nobody saw at the time, before he was even in the UFC, I knew who Dustin Poirier was. The documentary.
Fightville.
Amazing. Go watch it.
Seek it out.
But aside from all of that, of being why I'm a huge Dustin Poirier, is for everything you just mentioned. It's the same reason I'm like, Stipe is like, is like the guy to me. It's these guys that put family first, right? Or at least, and have that balance, right? As a family, I'm a dad of 3, right? You're a dad. I relate to that. And so I want to root for that. Like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, does Islam have kids? I don't know. I don't think he does.
He does actually. Just keeps them completely in private.
Well, I mean, good for him, right? I think that's great as well. But you have these 5 young up-and-coming fights. They got nothing else to do. They can be in the gym 4 times a day, eat, breathe. That's not the case for a Dustin, right? And I have the utmost respect for that. And, I always say, as you said, it's harder on the families because, one, you got to put up with dad being gone. I mean, he goes to South Florida for his camps. Not only that, like when he is home, is he 100% present all the time? I mean, it's this looming, just this monster hanging over your head. But if you can do it and still have a successful family and a loving relationships, I mean, how many families is it probably torn apart, right?
Yeah.
If you can do that, then you're just a good human, right? And aside from all that, that's why I love Dustin Poirier, and I want to see him fight again, right? This is not the fight he needs to go out on. Let's talk about that really quick, but before we do, he had his moments. But what we always kind of like rag on him a little bit about or have fun at his expense, the pulling up the shorts.
Yep.
Islam or Habib had him ready for that. I counted 3 different times. Islam cracked him, and it's a reset. That's all it is for Dustin. It's a reset. It's a habit reset that he had. He would take a step back, pull up his shorts. The minute his fingers touched his short, Islam rushed him and closed the distance and put him on the cage. I'm telling you, that was drilled into Makhachev's head, and I watched it happen 3 times. Go back and watch it. You'll see it too. Did you see it in real time?
Absolutely. They were prepared for it. You know, as you said, it's not like it's something that we just saw for the first time. It's a habit that he does. It's a tick, if you will. It's a reset. Like you said, it's just habit. And they were keyed in on that and say, well, and it's smart. It's brilliant on their part, right?
If you know,
that's it. If you know the guy's hands are going to be, I mean, why do you feint half the time? It's to get the guy's hands out of position, right? And then that way you can throw. So if he's willingly putting his hands out of position, attack. Smart.
I bet you Dustin goes back and watches that and is like, son of a gun.
Ah!
And I haven't seen it said anywhere. So I had to say it publicly. It's like, that was a tell. Like poker players have a tell. That was a tell Dustin had, and it got exposed on 3 different occasions. Not every time led to a takedown. I believe one of them did. Not all the times it led to a takedown, but it led to him being put against the cage. It led to him not having the distance to throw his strikes. It led to him not getting into these chaotic exchanges in which he thrived in and which was his path to victory. It cost him either a round and or fight. Who knows?
That's it. Hey, let me ask you, where do you stand? Do you have an opinion on this? The debate of whether Islam Makhachev or Jon Jones is the #1 pound-for-pound fighter on the planet right now, because there was a little discussion in the post-fight press conference. Dana said,
I have this on my notes. You're jumping the shark, but I'm glad.
Okay, all right. I didn't know if you had that in there, but I wanted to get, because I wanted to get your take on it.
All things can be true. Okay. Based off of the body of work within the X couple years in which we typically put rankings on, yes, Islam Makhachev is the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. Dana White is 1000% correct too. If you put them in a room together, Jon Jones is walking out, which in the reality-based sense of who is the pound-for-pound, because pounds don't weigh, pounds don't count anymore, then Jon Jones is the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world. So both things can be true, but you're looking at them through different lenses and different perspectives. Dana White's looking at him, hey, put him in a room, see who comes out. That's how we're going to tell.
And you know, to me, it's funny. I never spend too much time talking about pound-for-pound rankings because they're all theoretical and hypothetical. Anyway.
I saw your tweet, though.
But you're right, and I look, the thing that I tweeted out, and I really do believe this. I think both things can be true in the fact that I do believe Jon Jones is the greatest of all time. We've said it right here. He is the GOAT of MMA. His accomplishments are undeniable. But to me, and you touched on there, rankings are a snapshot in time, right? It's you're looking at things in a certain area, right? And I usually look. I mean, and now by the way, if you look at their career records, 26-1, 27-1. Now, obviously, we know Jones's 1 is a little bit suspect, but whatever. They have very similar career records. But if you look within what I do with my rankings, is I look at the last 3 years and put the most emphasis on the last 3 years. And if you look at the run that Islam has been on versus Jon Jones just has the 1 against Cyril Gane, that to me is you give Islam the nod for right now for the work, the volume of his work, the quality of his work. And so I have Islam #1 pound for pound right now, but I still believe Jon Jones is the greatest of all time. Yeah,
I think in the spirit of what we're talking about, you're right. In the spirit of it. I think maybe in the practicality of, Dana White's like Roman Coliseum, let's just throw him in a room and see who walks out.
Right.
He's right too.
He's right too.
You know what I mean? That's kind of like
John walks out of the room. John walks out of the room. I
chuckled in this debate because I'm like, they're not arguing the same point.
Right. And yeah, 100%. And again, and you never want to spend too much time talking about pound for pound rankings because you can't ever really be right or wrong because there's no way to put them together. But I think it's at least worth a mention. So I'm glad you were going to bring it up. I wanted to make sure that we didn't move on without bringing it up because I think it's right to have Islam number one, but I do not mean that as any slight at Jon Jones whatsoever. It's just the more body of work in recent times.
Yep. I mean, and that's what theoretically they made these rankings for.
Exactly.
All to flip the script, and who knows? Maybe they're negotiating with Johnny Bones Jones right now.
Hey, you never know what's going on behind the scenes. And listen, Dana White is a master of that, right? He plants little things and says little things in interviews because he knows that'll help a little bit. I did see Jon Jones pop up on Twitter and say, like, right? And he was like, hey, man, you see what the boss says. He's a tough man to please, but he obviously likes me. So, maybe you're right. There's always, we're out here talking about checkers and Dana White's back there playing chess. He's saying things in the media because he knows he's got some negotiations and there's a contract going on. And hey, man, if I stroke my man's ego a little bit and say how much I think he is, maybe he's a little bit more willing to put pen to paper. Maybe he's a little bit more willing to show up for the press conference that's supposed to happen. You know what I'm saying?
It's funny though. It's like I thought that when I woke up, I didn't watch the post-fight presser, right?
Right.
Way too late.
It's late. Yeah.
And especially in Memphis Central Time.
Yep.
Especially when I got a newborn and 2 little kids that are going to get me up at 6 regardless. Okay. But I thought that right away when I was reading it the next day. Right. And then I watched the clip and I'm like, he is intentionally having a different conversation because they're saying pound for pound. You must be an idiot if you think what is pound for pound? 2 people in a room, the one comes out. Okay, but they're your rankings and they're not going off that. But now you're talking about that. The guy was literally playing chess when everybody else was playing checkers. And it led me to one thing. And that's why I said that, well, he may be in negotiations. We don't know what's going on. And listen, I kind of believe that. I'm not a conspiracy theorist right now.
No, you're not. It's just we've seen it over the years. He does that. He's great at doing that. He'll work things into conversations to get little seeds out there planted that he's using for negotiations.
Connor will never say no to anything. Hey, Connor, we need you to do this.
It's so true. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. So true.
So all right. On the last thing on this fight and on Dustin Poirier, he needs a walk-off fight, in my opinion. His resume and his legacy is too big. I don't think. Listen, emotion. It's a bad time to start talking about retirement after a loss, right?
Yes.
You're down in the dumps. This meant so much to him getting that world title. He did not get it. I'm not saying he owes anybody anything because he certainly doesn't, except to his family. But as a fan of his, I want to see him make that walk one more time. And you know what? I want it to be against Justin Gaethje.
Oh, I was wondering what the name. I was going to ask you what the name was. Yeah, right. I mean, that fight's there, right? I mean,
they've mimicked each other's careers.
Yeah.
Right? They fought all the way back in what I think it was 17. They fought in 17. They fought, or maybe in 18, 24, and give it to me again in 25. And I don't know. I just think we need that one more. We need that walk one more time. He can't go out that way. He can't go out losing his, 2 of his last 3, and a 1 against a guy who, he may be a killer, but he's not a national huge name yet. He may be, but he needs one more. He just needs it. I don't think he can sit down and live with it. And selfishly, I can't either.
And you know what? That's a good shot because, again, you said they have the history between them. And normally, I wouldn't suggest anybody have a quote-unquote retirement fight against Justin Gaethje because, if you're talking about retirement, it usually means you're at the end of your career and we don't want to see. But Dustin Poirier is operating at an incredibly high level. Again, he just went, toe-to-toe with the pound-for-pound number 1 right now, made it very competitive. So I like that. I like that. We'll see what happens. And again, maybe it's for the undisputed lightweight title. Who knows? I mean, we got to see what happens here with Islam, but, maybe that 155-pound title is on the line. And, I don't know if the UFC would love that, come in for one last one, win it, walk away. But
getting off of Dustin really quick or getting off of Justin. Islam goes up, fights the winner of Belal and Leon Edwards, which makes complete sense with the timeline, by the way.
It does.
But you have would that number one contender? Do you think the UFC, knowing the popularity of Dustin Poirier, do you think they're hey you and Arman?
I don't think they would fight because Arman's training at ATT, so I don't think they would do it.
Okay.
I think I think you got to go. I think you got to go Arman. I mean, I think you have to go Arman Sarukian right now. To me, Islam should have to fight Arman before he moves up. That's it. And look, if Belal wins, Belal has come out and trained with those guys.
That's why it wouldn't happen. I know that.
So and I think that throws the wrench in it. Yeah,
it's too much of we're a brotherhood type guy to let that happen, in my opinion.
I think it throws a wrench in. Now, if Leon wins, then absolutely he could go up. But I do think, and I wouldn't necessarily say but I think he does. I think he has to fight Arman. I mean, Arman came in his UFC debut on short notice, fought against Islam. I mean, an incredible assignment. Had a great, debut. Came up short, but then since then has battled his way back to this position. So I would like to see Islam face Arman. I think they got to do that fight before Islam moves up, and you got to wait and see what happens again with Belal and Leon anyway. Because, like I said, I don't think he'd face Belal, but we'll see.
Speaking of that, phenomenal interview you had with Ali, and he talks about that in the sound clip. I'm surprised it didn't go more viral.
Right.
There are some things out of that clip that went viral. Definitely talking about the presser and Ali explaining, the cultural differences of why Islam got so upset. That was great insight.
Great explanation. Yep.
Which I don't think a lot of people understood. Like, why is he so mad? Right. But literally context is key in a lot of things. Right.
Yep.
When he says that Belal Muhammad is going to be arrested in Manchester for what he's going to do to Leon Edwards, like I think I even texted you, spits out coffee.
It was amazing, right? Ali Abdelaziz, some people will just write off what he says. I mean, it's obviously his clients or whatever, but I love it. I mean, he's out there, he's playing promoter as well for his guys. I mean, he's a negotiator, but he's out there playing promoter as well. And yeah, when he said that, I was like, wow, absolutely. And it all stemmed from a question of me just asking him what took so long to get it done. He's like, man, I never had any, concern whatsoever. Dana promised me it would get done. He's a man of his word. He's like, but I'm telling you right now, they're going to need to have extra security on hand. I'm worried. He said, I'm worried that Belal might get arrested for what he does to Leon Edwards in Manchester. So that's going to be great. Stirring the pot a little bit as we build towards Manchester later this summer. That'll be a lot of fun.
All right, let's move on to the co-main event. In a 5-round fight, Sean Strickland wins via split decision. We'll get into that later. But he beats Paulo Costa by split decision. And this is a revert fight for Costa. Like, he came out early, cracking Strickland's legs. And what happened, and I said it would happen, I said the cross checks of Strickland, he does that, and it totally deterred any more really heavy leg kicks. And every time he did throw a leg kick, it got met with a check and a cross check, and it was instant reaction out of Costa. Like, he did not like him. He was in pain. But aside from all that, it was a revert. It was a Marvin Vettori type fight, and it was a Israel Adesanya type fight. And it was the one thing we said he could not do, conserve his energy. He even came out and he said, I was trying to conserve my energy, and it cost him because he is a destroyer early on, and he made a conscious decision not to, and it theoretically probably cost him a great opportunity at winning that fight.
It really did. In my head, I'm like, man, well, he certainly didn't watch our show before the fight because he is not listening to our advice whatsoever. You specifically said, I don't want to see any leg kicks whatsoever because it's going to be a problem. And we both agreed as counterproductive as weird as it may sound, don't treat this like a 5-round fight. Treat it like a 5-minute fight and just go out there and throw down. And as soon as he started to conserve his energy, it just was like, no, don't do this. And listen, to his credit, he did have a little something in the tank for the final round, but by then it didn't even matter. You know what I mean? He was so far down on the scorecards, at least 2 of the
allegedly,
that it didn't matter, right? And so, yeah, I just didn't love it. And it's just so weird because, I mean, Paulo Costa is so marketable, right? I mean, the guy is, I mean, he looks the part of a fighter. There's no question about it. He's hilarious on social media. He's funny. All these, I mean, and when he has highlights, the highlights are incredible because he is an absolute destroyer. But those highlights are becoming fewer and far between. And so I just, yeah, it's a tough one, man. I don't know what you do with him next, man. It's like he's in a rebuilding phase of his career. It's like you almost need to get him out of the rankings and you know, face some lower level competition to start building yourself back up. Because this just was not a great performance, and he certainly did not listen to the advice that came from the Cageside crew.
I mean, he gave a quote. I think it was through his social media, and I'm gonna read it really quick. F points or conserving energy. He realized it. I mean, watching the fight back, he's probably kicking himself so bad. F points or conserving energy. Because
what did we say going in? We did F points and conserving energy. We tried.
And Joe Rogan made such a point, I think, a very valid point in this broadcast. In the broadcast is Israel Adesanya took a whole heaping load of confidence from him. I personally thought the Robert Whittaker loss got it back to him. And that's why I was so encouraged for this fight. I said, this, in a loss, he looked amazing in this loss.
Yep.
Because he was moving forward against Robert Whittaker. He was throwing big bombs. They were just knockdown, drag-out fight. And then it was a revert. Do you think, to some degree or another, it's like when that pressure gets there, it's like freeze almost?
Yeah, and it's funny because a lot was made of his corner, you know, after 3 rounds saying, hey, you're up 2-1. But when I heard that, I thought, nah, that's just his corner trying to keep his confidence high. You know what I mean? Like, hey, we don't want you to give up on yourself. We don't want you to feel the pressure, to feel, you know, down, dejected, whatever the case may be. But yeah, I mean, he's fighting top competition. I mean, you look at the names: Sean Strickland, Robert Whittaker, Marvin Vettori, Israel Adesanya. He's fighting top competition, so you have to give him respect for that. But at the end of the day, he's 1-4 over his last 5 fights, and the one win is over Luke Rockhold, who was coming off a 3-year layoff, right? It's tough, man. I still feel like Paulo Costa has the ability to be elite. I mean, he is as dangerous as they come. But yeah, it feels like there's something with the mentality. And maybe, you know, just that little message, hopefully he believes that. F points. F conserving energy, man. Like, that's the way you need to fight moving forward. It doesn't mean that sometimes it's not going to work out your way and you're going to go out on your shield. Maybe it does, but it's going to give you the best opportunity for winning. I just don't think that he's built to be an outpoint a guy over 15 or 25 minutes type of fighter. That's just not who he is. He's a physically imposing figure who needs to go in and intimidate and destroy. And so, you know, hopefully there's a reset, because this wasn't a great performance. And yeah, you can say split decision, but no.
Before we get to that, what do you make of the fight being a little lackluster? Because I think everybody was saying, like, okay, this is going to be a, you know, to quote Jim Ross, a slobber knocker, right?
Right.
It wasn't. Sean Strickland walked him down. Paulo retreated the entire time. And it looked like there was too much respect given, albeit well-deserved respect, too much respect given on from both men.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, because, you know, Sean Strickland, and I think they noted it very well on the broadcast as well, that he wasn't necessarily cutting off the cage as he was moving forward. He was simply chasing around.
He very rarely does, though, truth be told.
Agreed. He definitely doesn't. But that, you know, that could have made things more engaging, is to trap his opponent against the cage with the footwork and cutting him off. And he didn't do that. He got a little wild and crazy at the end and just started to open a little bit. But, you know, listen, I think maybe potentially, you know, that's a situation where Sean realized what was at stake as well, right? And if I'm simply outpointing the guy and he's presenting no danger to me, why am I going to go immerse myself in danger and give him an opportunity to attack me and to potentially clip me and knock me out? You know, Sean obviously apologized for the fight afterwards. It was a pretty lackluster fight overall. It was light on entertainment value, but it was effective for him in his career, right? Sean Strickland knows what that championship money feels like. You know what I mean? He knows what that does for the bank account, and he understands what's at stake. And I like what he said. Look, I'm going to sit around and wait. I'm a company guy. I took this assignment. I fought down the rankings, and now I'm going to sit here and wait. You know, it looks like not official yet, but it looks like Dricus du Plessis and Israel Adesanya will happen in Australia later this year. The only thing that might throw a wrench in that is you do have Robert Whittaker and Khamzat Chimaev fighting later this month. And so depending on the result of that fight, maybe they could jump the line. And then Sean Strickland might have to kind of, think a little bit more about what he's intending to do. But at the very least right now, you wait and see what happens with Whittaker and Chimaev. You wait and see what happens with the title fight. And then you start making your case because, that a split decision with Dricus du Plessis that a lot of people feel like maybe he won is his only loss in this current run. So I think maybe Sean was being a little bit conservative in this fight, even though he was clearly the aggressor, because why wade into trouble when you don't need to be, when you know what's at stake?
I'm glad you brought up Chimaev and, the Robert Whittaker fight, because if Robert Whittaker wins that fight, he's not getting the shot. It's immediately going to Sean Strickland. Right. But if Chimaev does, now we got a very interesting scenario. They were obviously grooming Chimaev to be like that next guy. And I don't know what's going on, travel issues, all this stuff, right? Being able to fight outside of or fight in the United States, yada, 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 yada. I think it really hurts marketability. Okay. He's not the marketing superstar he was, say, a year and a half ago, in my opinion.
I agree.
It was almost radio silence from him. But don't get me wrong, people are still enthralled by this guy. So now but the question is to put a business hat on. I'm going to ask John Morgan to put his business hat on. Chimaev comes out and starches him, right? Starches Whittaker.
Hypothetically, yep.
And you have Sean Strickland weighing there. Who sells more pay-per-views? Because Sean Strickland is the beloved American hero in this world right now. People love this guy, and they will pay to see him. Are they still that way with Chimaev? And if they are, who do you go with from a business perspective?
It's so interesting, man, and I think you laid it out perfectly. I love the fact that you're thinking about this way, because it's the reality of what the UFC does, right? It's not just rankings. It's about what's going to sell pay-per-views, what's going to sell tickets. To be honest with you, because I think you hit the nail on the head perfectly, Khamzat Chimaev still resonates greatly with the hardcores, right? I mean, he's still that kind of boogeyman, the things he says, the things he does, the things he's capable of in the cage. But because of the layoff and because of the travel issues and because of the health issues and because of everything that's around him, I don't know that Chimaev resonates with the greater audience the way that Sean Strickland does, right? Who has become an absolute superstar. Love him or hate him, likely or unlikely, he has become a superstar. So I think what it honestly would boil down to is, all right, title fight happens. Where's the next title fight going to happen? Because if it's going to happen, depending on how the schedule works out, if it's going to happen in Abu Dhabi, if you need a middleweight title fight for Abu Dhabi, Khamzat Chimaev gets it. If you need one for Las Vegas, you give it to Strickland. And so I think
but even with Abu Dhabi, really quick, they're going to air that primetime United States.
Right. But those are your business partners over there, right? And they love Khamzat Chimaev, right? So that's why at that point, you're not even doing it for pay-per-view sales. You're not even doing it for ticket sales. You're doing it for your business partners who want to see that guy compete in him. So I think there's multiple variables, but you laid it out perfectly, because not that long ago, you would say, well, if Khamzat wins, we're putting that guy in the title fight immediately. This guy is the superstar. He's the budding, guy that everybody wants to see. And I don't know that he's that guy anymore. But if he starches Whittaker, and oh, by the way, on ABC network television, maybe a lot of people do start talking. So if it's a ho-hum decision win over Robert Whittaker, Sean Strickland all day. If he runs through Robert Whittaker on national TV, network television, and cuts a promo the way he's capable of, and by the way, you need it to happen in Abu Dhabi later this year where you're going, and maybe that ends up happening. So I think there's a lot of variables, but it's an interesting discussion that we're going to have to keep having, because there's a lot at play. It's not as clear in black and white as it would have been at one point.
Neutral location, who's buying more? I understand. Take U.S. Abu Dhabi out of the equation. Let's put it in Mexico City. It's between those two guys.
I think you still got to see the result of the fight. But I'd honestly probably lean towards Sean Strickland right now. I think Sean Strickland. I think he's the bigger star right now. I think he's as weird as that may sound, I think he moves the needle more right now.
Man, there's been such a course correct with like woke culture that people are like, Sean Strickland is the anti-woke, and now people love him for it.
They absolutely love him for it. He has become the most nobody. I mean, you think about how long the guy was around, and he even would talk about it in our media days. Like, I ain't got no sponsors. Like, who's going to sponsor me? Who's going to put their money with me to trust me to represent their brand, right? And now all of a sudden, Chris Curtis tells a hilarious story of, I think it was in Toronto, they were at a weigh-in or a press conference or something, and hearing a fan yell at him like, "Sean, tell me what to think." And Chris Curtis is like, "No, don't let him tell you what to think. That is the worst idea ever. He's a psychopath. What are you doing?" But he has become a star, man. It's amazing. So it's wild. It's wild to think that I mean, if you'd have sat here 2 years ago, 3 years ago and said, "Hey, by the way, in 2024, I bet you Sean Strickland's going to be a bigger star than Khamzat Chimaev," people would have just laughed at you and thought you are absolutely insane. But I think that's where we stand right now.
Well, you look at the Diaz brothers, right? Originally we weren't in this woke culture like we had gotten into, and whether I don't care what side of the equation you're on, right? It's irrelevant to this. But the Diaz brothers were when they were in Strikeforce, when Nick was in Strikeforce, starting fights with KJ Nunes' dad. Remember that?
Yes.
They were public enemy number one in MMA. Now they are the most beloved, right? And I almost equate it to it's weird. Everything's wrestling, right? Everything can go back to wrestling.
Everything's wrestling. I
swear to God, Stone Cold changed the dynamics of how fans view characters.
Is that right? As a historian, I'm still learning about the pro wrestling game. I get little
Stone Cold was the guy. He was the first one that was like, F authority. I'm going to drink beer. I'm going to curse. I'm going to flip people off. And I don't give a damn whether you like me or hate me. And people loved him for that. That was his character. And literally that was the late 90s. And it shifted, I think, the whole dynamic. Now we yearn for those people. The Diaz brothers are obviously that. They were public enemy number one back in the day.
Yes, they were.
Now they're beloved. Sean Strickland was demonized for that just a couple years ago. He is beloved for it now. And it's that buck authority. And everything goes back to wrestling, man. It's all wrestling.
Everything's wrestling, man. It is indeed.
Okay, we got to touch on David Torelli.
Oh, okay.
Okay. You got the scorecard in front of you?
I do. David Torelli had this fight 49-46 for Paulo Costa, giving Paulo Costa rounds 1, 2, 3, and 4, only giving Sean Strickland round 5. Whereas Chris Lee had it 50-45, so obviously giving him every round. Sal D'Amato had it 49-46. Strickland only giving Costa round 1.
What'd you have it?
I had it 49-46. I did give Costa round 1, but that was it.
Okay. Just because of the thudding leg kicks?
Yeah, that was it.
All right. I mean, I'm not going to stand on that. I had it 50-45, me personally, just by the aggression and the moving forward and Costa moving backwards. Yep. And I could see he was already tired and whatever. Significant strikes, I think, still had Strickland, even though I don't know if a significant strike, a teep to the belly, but those things add up. Dude, I guarantee Acosta is still sore as hell from those teep tips to the belly. But Dana White, he basically comes out and he says, he says it was effing nuts, actually, to be exact. He hopes he never refs a fight again. I don't know that name. Do you know him?
I don't know him personally. No, I know the name from scorecards, but I don't know him personally.
Is he an East Coast guy? Okay.
Yeah.
What can you be watching when you see that?
Here's me. All right, now let me preface this by saying Dave Torelli, by the way, was also the gentleman who gave Mitch Raposo the first fight of the night, which everybody thought should have been a clear win for Andre Lima as well. So he had 2 really bad cards on the night. But in the co-main event, I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt in the fact that he's judging on the criteria, right? And I say this is why I say I think the criteria needs updating or better wording sometimes, right? Because what we're supposed to be looking for is the most immediately impactful shots, right? That's what it says in the criteria, is rewarding the most immediately impactful shots. And so if you're looking at Sean Strickland, who we don't think of as a power striker, we think of as pumping the jab, moving forward, pumping the jab, maybe you're saying, well, those jabs aren't going to end the fight, But when Paulo Costa hits you, it thuds, it hurts. You know what I mean? Like it's something there, and it looks more immediately impactful to me because he's the stronger, more powerful guy, and it has the more opportunity of ending the fight. So therefore, I'm giving this round to Paulo Costa. Now, I don't know if that's Dave Torelli's mindset. That's me trying to give him the benefit of the doubt in that he's interpreting the criteria.
Even though no big strikes were landed.
I know, and that's what I don't think the scorecard is defensible, so I don't want to. I'm just at least
and I get it, and I don't,
you know?
I don't like to like it. You can see I take the side of a judges a lot of times on this, and I can say I can make the argument. I don't agree. I can make the argument.
Right.
This is one that I can't though. I can't even make the argument, and so I'm just obviously he's got to be reffing in a co-main event spot in a UFC pay-per-view. He had to have been around the block a time or two. I just can't figure out what we're watching to give that scorecard. I just can't. Like one glancing blow off the top of a head because the Philly shell takes it doesn't equate to 30 teeps to the body that makes you completely go backwards. It was a ho-hum fight, so I'm not going to say Costa just totally whooped his butt because he didn't, but he definitely won every outside of maybe round one. It's crazy.
Yeah. And listen, he has been, look, he was at UFC. I'm looking at MMA Decisions, which by the way, a great resource. If you're ever looking for judging stuff, MMAdecisions.com. But he was in action at UFC 301, UFC 299, UFC 288, UFC 287. So I don't know him personally, but he is a pretty busy judge overall. And but I think this was a bad one. And look, like I said, you as a referee yourself, man. I mean, I said you go to bat for these folks a lot, and we've talked about what a pressure situation, what a difficult job it is. And I do want to do that. Like I hate when people are just completely insulting and diminishing, and this guy sucks and he's a boxing judge and all the things that they say. You know what I mean? But I think it's just better to look at it and say, like, I just don't think this was a very defensible scorecard. And hey, look, it. I know the fans may not realize sometimes these judges, these referees, they do go back and review, and they do kick themselves in the butt, and they do, go over things and try to learn and try to educate. But I hope this is one he gets better from, because I just didn't see it. I didn't see it.
Yeah. When they read the first score, they gave the first score for Strickland, right?
First one was Costa. I think the first one was Costa. I think the first one was Costa.
Me and my buddy Grant, we were like, what? Like, it was I think, and that was like universal. You heard the crowd like, huh?
Yeah, it was. It's just bizarre. And it's weird because in the media, I'm like, was I watching something wrong? Like, I immediately questioned myself, like, what did I?
But it seems like those crazy boxing scores. It's 119 to 111 for so-and-so, 119, 111 for the other guy. I'm like,
what? What are you watching?
That makes no sense whatsoever. Like, that's how this, like, when your first scorecard read 49-46, your second scorecard read 50-45.
So crazy, right? Absolutely insane that to be that split on it. So yeah, wild.
Yeah. Anyways, well, so
are you worried? Are you worried about Conor and Chandler with this press conference being canceled today, and couple that with the footage of Conor being at the club the last couple weekends? Are you worried at all?
Not until you just said something.
It's funny, like,
you hear what I'm doing right now?
Knocking on wood over there. Knocking on wood. It's funny because obviously, like you said, we thought we were going to be able to talk about this press conference. We're not. And on the surface, it really doesn't mean anything. A press conference was canceled. That doesn't mean anything 4 weeks from now. That doesn't mean that he won't be at the fight and that he hasn't been putting the work in the gym. And Conor has a flair for the dramatic. And we don't even know if it was Conor. We kind of assume it had something to do with Conor, considering this was a press conference in his backyard. But it is when you put it all together, it is a little weird, man. It is a little weird. I still think it happens. There's too much money at stake. There's too much going on. But you gotta wonder what the conversations are like in the USC office right now. I would pay to be a fly on the wall right now in the war room and hear what the discussions are unfolding.
So as the advertisement for that fight was happening on Saturday night, Grant's wife, Melissa, I talk about my buddy Grant a lot on here. Mm-hmm. You've met him. Great guy.
Yep.
His wife, Melissa, goes, you think that fight happens? And I go, yeah, of course it happens. And I go, why? You don't think? And she goes, no, I don't think. And she's very knowledgeable. She judges a lot around here. They're boned up, man. Don't get in a pick'em league with her. She'll whoop your butt. She goes, I just don't think it happens. I go, what? Why not? She's like, a lot of variables. Like one, I think a drug testing is a possibility, this, that, and the other. She started laying out these scenarios, and I go, he's already been tested. Like, why don't you think the fight was put off this far? Is because, you know, we needed to clear what was in his system. I don't fault him for taking anything to get over that injury. I would too.
Heck no,
right?
Absolutely.
But now, man, she put that bad juju in the air. Then now you put that out there. Golly, how devastating would that be?
I mean, International Fight Week, a card that was built basically around this fight. I mean, you know, if this fight were to fall out for some reason, you're now looking at UFC 303 Hill versus Ulberg. And no disrespect for Jamal Hill and Carlos Ulberg, but I mean, you know, you had folks saying that UFC 300 wasn't quite up to muster of what they expected. I mean, this would be International Fight Week. You know, you got Ian Machado Gary against Michael Page. That's a very intriguing fight. Hey, I love that fight.
Do you remember I said that would be a great next opponent?
You did. You nailed that one. That was spot on. So that's a great. So I mean, these are great fights, but man, again, it's a press conference. It's a press conference. It doesn't mean
there's
anything.
Smoke, there's fire, Mr. Morgan.
Yes, I know. That's the scary part. And it's a press conference that was in Dublin, right? I mean, people had already made the journey, you know what I mean? Staff and media and all these things. It was built in his backyard for a reason. They gave away free tickets, but you had to have a ticket. They sold out like instantly. You had John Kavanaugh saying, you got to let more people in. This isn't enough people. We got to get up more tickets. And then the thing doesn't happen. And again, we still don't have any explanation for it yet, but everybody assumes it had something to do with Conor McGregor, rightly or wrongly. We may find out that it had nothing to do with it.
Speaking, though, in his back,
logically speaking,
you know, even if Michael Chandler was deathly ill, like they'd run Conor out there.
100%. That's the fair assumption, right? Yeah, you'd have a one-man press conference, right? You know what I mean? Hey, Michael Chandler couldn't make it, but we wanted your native son to be here as a send-off, you know, before he goes overseas for this fight. Exactly right. They do it anyway. So. And then again, you couple it with the footage, you know, the past couple weekends he's put on social media of him being at the club. Now, you know, we talk about Dana White playing chess. Conor McGregor plays chess. They're two grandmasters at manipulation in the media and social media and fandom. So maybe it's, you know, Conor McGregor pushing back and saying, you know, I know we've got this contract, but I think I'm worth a little bit more than that. And boy, wouldn't it be a shame if your International Fight Week card just fell apart because I couldn't make it there. I mean, I'm having a lot of fun out at the clubs. Why don't you put a little extra zero on that contract right there? Can we add a little extra zero on the end of that? I mean,
checkers, maybe.
You know what I'm saying? I mean,
who knows?
So, you know, who knows? Who knows? I mean, if there's a dude that's going to show up on pressure, I can't imagine Conor McGregor would not show up on fight night. So I'm not worried. I see a lot of people worried. Oh, maybe this fight doesn't happen. As you said, there was discussion in your household as to whether or not this fight would happen. I think it still happens. But, man, this is an interesting storyline.
When have you ever known Conor McGregor to not show up to a press conference?
That's where he shines. That's his stage. That's his platform. I mean, and this was going to be in his backyard. I mean, can you imagine the support and the energy? And I mean, Michael Chandler, every word he said would just get drowned out with boos. Like the speakers would not be loud enough to even hear what he has to say because it would be so difficult for him. It's bizarre. I'm gonna chalk it up. I'm gonna chalk it up to gamesmanship on Conor McGregor. Right? Dana White was asked about the partying footage, and he said, "Hey, look, Conor's a smart man. You know, I don't even know if it's real or not. One, he's got a beard on. The other, he doesn't. I don't know if these are in sequential. Maybe it's old footage that he's just putting out there, having a little fun. So I'm chalking this up right now to gamesmanship. I'm chalking it up to Conor manipulating and playing the game like he does better than anybody, and that he's still going to show up at UFC 303 here in Las Vegas. But it would be, you'd be remiss if you didn't mention it at all. It's like a little bit concerning. You know what I mean?
I wasn't even with the cancellation until you talked about it, and then I reverted back to the conversation on Saturday. Now I'm terrified.
And it's funny because I'm like you. I heard a lot of people over the years. Is Conor ever coming back? Yeah, he's coming back. Is this fight going to happen? Yeah, it's going to happen. I was that guy. Yeah, and I think I'm still that guy. But it is another like, what?
Do you have any inside sources? I mean, you are like literally regarded as the best journalist in MMA history. Okay, and you don't even have to release it publicly. Get on the horn, find out, and text me. I may or may not leak it, but it wouldn't be on you.
It's funny. I do have, a couple people with knowledge of situations and that I will certainly speak to. But as of right now, I can tell you honestly, as we sit here right now, I do not know the reasoning, and I have not heard anything about it other than, hey, we'll keep you up to date. As again, it was said postponed. I can't imagine they'll reschedule this thing. It's getting too close to the fight. I can't imagine. You think Chandler's going to book another flight over to Ireland? I mean, good on Chandler that he was willing to make this, right? He's like, yeah, I'll play ball with you. I'll go over there, and I know I'm going to get booed at, but I'll break my camp 4 weeks out to make this trip overseas if that's what you think is going to help promote this fight. But if they say, hey, all right, we got it rescheduled for next week, does Michael Chandler say, oh, absolutely, I'm a company guy, let's go? He might, because he's that kind of guy. He is a great company guy, but I could also see him be like, hey, man, I already changed my plans last week. I messed everything up, and you canceled on me last minute. I'm not booking this again. No, absolutely not. If he wants to come to Florida, we can go do it at Sanford. There's a couple spots over here. We can do it at the Hard Rock or something. But I'm not going to Ireland. I think he'd be well within his rights to do that. So,
and he doesn't need to be anywhere to sell this fight.
No, you're right. And look, I mean, hey, let's be honest, right? And I love me some Michael Chandler.
Yeah.
I love me some Michael Chandler. Like, I love him as a human being. I love him as a fighter. I love everything about the guy. But Conor McGregor is the one selling the pay-per-views, right? Like nobody the week of UFC 303 is like, are you buying the Michael Chandler fight this week? You know what I mean? Like, no disrespect. You know what I'm saying? They're like, are you buying the Conor McGregor fight? So, yeah, right. You nailed it. Conor could do the press conference. So they could reschedule it and just have him do it on his own, and there would still be value in it. You'd still get some sound bites. But I don't know, man. I'm knocking on wood as well here. I'm knocking on wood over here as well. I'm cautiously optimistic that this is just a funny little speed bump along the way, and this is a master of his craft having some gamesmanship, and this fight still happens, but it is worth monitoring over the course of this month.
I'm now officially terrified. I appreciate it. With that being said, Islam Makhachev retains. Is he or isn't he pound for pound number one? To be debated. Paulo Costa, Sean Strickland, dud of a fight. Not a dud of a fight. It was a ho-hum of a fight, but Strickland is still that guy. He's still that star. He has said he's willing to wait for that title shot. Will it come to fruition anytime soon? We will wait and see. And I never thought I'd be saying this to sound off, but is the Conor McGregor fight going to happen? With that being said, for John Morgan, I'm knocking on wood, Eric McMahon. Enjoy the fights.